Hello, and welcome to part 3 of our terrain generation and satellite imagery creation tutorial by Forum8AZ in order to bring into UC Winroad. And the first, part 1, we created our XML terrain data. Part 2, we created our satellite imagery and chopped it up in Photoshop to be prepared to bring into UC. And this is part 3 where we will import everything into UC Winroad and create our file. And to begin with, we're going to create location settings, as is probably not a location setting for whichever area you're going to use. So we generally create them ourselves for whatever location that we're at. So we're going to go to application options, open up UC Winroad, go to application options, location settings. And I have a bunch more than you're going to have because I've created a lot of different ones. But anyway, go to new. And this is going to take a minute to load the model, so I'm going to pause this while this does so I don't waste tutorial time. Okay, now that our models have been loaded, it'll bring up this window asking about the location settings that you're going to create. So we want to name this, and this is the name that's going to appear in the top right of your file about this area. When your file is running, it will say whatever the location, whatever the name you put here is. So you can either pick the country or the city or whatever really you want to put. I'm going to put the city because this is Abu Dhabi. You have to pick one of these. It doesn't really matter which one. This isn't going to affect anything. It's just you need to pick one of these in order to go on. And the country that we're doing is United Arab Emirates, which isn't in here. So it doesn't matter what you pick. Just pick one and move it over to there. And then for latitude and longitude, we're going to use our Excel sheet from before, or whatever our center point was in Google Earth, and use that. Ours happened to be 24 degrees, 28 minutes, and 0.21 seconds. Our longitude was 54 degrees, 22 minutes, and 0.03. And you can see after I've already done this, it's already right on where Dubai is, or where the UAE is on this map. So then we're going to hit next, and we're on north and east, which is correct. We'll hit next, and the driving characteristics, this is important because this is for the whole file. You can't change this afterwards. So we're going to want to, once the location settings are set, we're going to want this to be driving on the right, because in Abu Dhabi they drive on the right. Vehicle clearance times, I generally leave default. Then you click next. Roads that have equal priority, subsequent rules apply, I tend to select, and vehicles give way to the right. Then click next. Then on turning conflicts, vehicles give way to the right, and vehicles turning left give way, which is correct for this situation. And I like to put, if there's right on red in whatever country you're going to, you can select vehicles give way, so then they can make right turns even though it's red. And the traffic default I leave as it is for the roundabouts. And we click next. Traffic lights, I tend to leave this timings as default, but there's different settings in here available for your traffic light settings, but I generally leave these all default. And then click next. This will give you your list of available models. You want to select the first one, go to the last one, and shift select so it selects them all and load them all. That way, whatever models come with it, you want to be able to use. So we'll go to next. This creates a traffic profile. We'll call this UAE. And this will be our traffic profile for the United Arab Emirates. So we can add a couple different varieties of cars, and we want right-handed drive cars. I'll have more models in here again than you will have probably, but whatever side of the road they're driving on is the ones that you want to select, and just select a few cars or whatever you want to do. You can always add cars to the traffic profile afterwards, but this will default to bring only these cars in as when you start to drive on the roads or create traffic on the roads. So we will click next, which will bring us to the loading sections page. The next part of the location settings is the default sections that you will need, and I'm going to have a lot more in here because I have a lot of sections saved into my UC Window data save sections folder, which is generally on the C drive. So let me go that really quick just so you can see what I'm talking about. So there's a bunch of sections here and a bunch of other ones. So if you put the sections into this folder, then they will show up in here. But you need a default one-way section, one lane each way, and a default single section in order to start a new file. So after I have those two in there, you can make your own, and then this will become the road. Whatever roads you make, these will become the defaults for the file. So sometimes it's good to make one, which will be covered in another tutorial. Make a section and have it in here, so every time you start the file, it goes to that. But after that, we're done with the location settings. So now we have Abu Dhabi here at the top, at which point we're going to go to make a user-defined project. So we're going to go to New Project, User-Defined Project. Our terrain that we've made in our satellite images are 20 by 20. So we're going to click on this button, which is 20 by 20. Location settings, we're going to pick Abu Dhabi, and it'll default go to our lat long. And we're going to use blank terrain right now. So we're going to just click OK and let UC Window load the... While it's loading, I'm going to show you something that we need to do for the satellite images right now. The satellite images need to be put... Here's my satellite imagery is all in here. So I need to select all the images that I made and then go to C, UC Window Data, Textures, Terrain, Satellite. And again, I'm going to have a ton more in here than you will have, but anything that shows in this folder will show up on the UC Window end. So we're going to copy those in there. Actually, want to leave those in this folder as well. So now those are in here. So now when we go to the satellite view, they'll be in there. So we have this. We are now in our UC Window file. For this, I also generally like to go to terrain here and kick the viewing distance up because there's nothing in it yet, just so we can see it farther. So if I set the viewing distance to 10,000, and first thing I'm going to do is import the terrain. So we're going to go to the terrain patch editor, and we're going to load the terrain patch, and our terrain patch is right here, and you can see that it's fairly large. It's 145 megs because of the amount of XY data on this thing. So again, I'm going to pause this and let this load because this also takes a little bit of time for this to load. So I'll be back after the pause. Now that it's loaded, I'm just going to hit the triangulate button, and this will also generate this is going to generate the patch into UC Window Terrain. Now that we see the patch in here, because there's so many X and Y points at this XML file, in the creation of this XML file, to match up with our terrain, we're just going to hit done and let it load this. Now once that's done, you can see that it has loaded some terrain into our file. So what we're going to do next is kind of a method to reduce the size of the satellite, or of the terrain map, or the terrain patch inside of UC Window. So if we go back to the terrain patch editor, this is going to sound a little bit strange, but when we're going to delete the terrain patch back out, because in doing so, your UC Window prompts you, when you go to delete the terrain patch, you get prompted right here by UC Window, do you wish to restore original terrain data? And if we hit no here, UC Window will keep the terrain that the terrain patch created, except it'll be at 50 meters instead of 30 meters like the DEM data was. But it's perfectly fine because the satellite images will make up the rest. So if we hit no here, then now that data is no longer in there, but when we hit done, you can see that the terrain, even though there's no images on here yet, you can still see that there is terrain is still there. So the next step that we're going to do is import the satellite images to go on top of this terrain, and that is this, the street map button. So we're going to click the street map button. First thing to do is go to find satellite picture, and then hit the grid button right here. So if we hit the grid button, it brings up the satellite picture grid, and we're going to have to do this actually twice, because the first one we're going to make the grid for the 25 images that go span the whole thing, and the second one we're going to do the smaller one. So for the first thing, we have our cell widths are going to be 4,000 by 4,000, and with a width of 5 cells by 5 cells. And for this position in UC Winroad, that is the last part of our XML sheet that we've created before. If we scroll all the way down to the bottom, UC Winroad positions, this is asking for what the position is inside of UC Winroad. If this is 20 by 20, which is ours is right now, you can see that this bottom thing, the position of the UC Winroad terrain is 0.5, 0.5, because it's right at the edge. So if we go back to UC Winroad and we change this to 0.5, 0.5, we click OK. There's our 25 grid cells, and this middle one. So each time you click one of these, it brings up this the folder of where our images are in. So basically, what we want to do is just go through those one and find them in order. So this is Abu Dhabi 1 through 25, and I'm going to pause this and do this so we don't take up tutorial time, and I'll be back after I have these 24 loaded. Okay, so now that we have our 25 images loaded, I loaded the middle one just to show you that we will be removing it, and this is the remove street map. So click on the middle button to remove that tile. You can click OK so you can see what our, so this is where the middle section is going to be. Obviously our center point's at the middle of that, so that we're going to have, you can see the tiles aren't that great of resolution at this level, but they are perfectly fine for flying by and having just some background to this square area that will be our 4 kilometer by 4 kilometer center. So we're going to load that now. So we'll go back to the street view command. We're going to hit this load street maps once again. In order to get this middle area, now we have 4 squares, Abu Dhabi A, B, C, and D, that we created. So we're going to do a 2,000 by 2,000 because it's 4,000 total, and 2 cells by 2 cells. The same thing with this position again. If we open up the Excel document and we change these to 4 and 4 before they were 20, these are both 4. Down here, the coordinates changed. Before they were 0.5 when this was 20. So this is the position of the image left bottom when it's 4 kilometers by 4 kilometers. So it's X or YX again. So it's 8015.78 and 7989.11.078. So 0.8015. So 8015. That didn't work. 808 and 7989.11. Let's double check that. 7989.11. Then we click OK, and you can see that it made 4 little squares right here. So that then the same thing we'll do again. We'll click on the little square and go to Abu Dhabi B, or A, I mean. B, C, and D. Now that those are loaded, I generally click use tiles here because it'll make for a better resolution in these center images. So just to show you, we have a lot of image data here. So if you only had a few smaller ones, you might be able to get away with using a higher resolution, but I'll show you what happens anyway, just so we're going to end up using very low. But if we go to say normal and I click OK, it'll tell you how big of you're going to create a file that's 5 gigabytes big, which is not going to work. It will not work for that. So do you want to wish to lower the resolution? Yes. And then it says you're about to create 1.6, still too big. When we click yes again, then it will start creating them. So it's lowering the resolution of those tiles. So UC Rhino is actually tiling it a little bit farther than we tiled it, just to make them a little bit more non-pixelated in the resolution. So as this is going, usually takes a little bit faster than this. We'll pause and let this load. Okay, so now that loaded, and you can see this line around the edge is our line from where the difference between our 20 kilometer and 5 kilometer area. So you can see right there, clearly the resolution is much better on the 20K, but when you're on the 5 or the 4 kilometer area. So our center point was somewhere around here. So this data is fine for using a satellite image to create your roads. And then as we back out, that other data helps us with making a cohesive 20 kilometer by 20 kilometer satellite imagery to make up the background. So that is it. Then now we have our terrain in and our satellite images in, and now we can start creating our UC Winroad file. This will allow us to use using Google Earth, and this technique will allow you to use any data from any terrain from anywhere in the world, and satellite images to match it. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you during the next tutorial.